Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Our afternoon program is about to begin shortly. Please be seated. As a friendly reminder, our next session here is the panel discussion on the role of the designers in today's circular fashion industry. Fashion Summit has adopted a non-printing approach. The conference program, speaker profiles, and Q&A online platform are now all available on our event app. By scanning the QR code at the back of your admission badge, you will be able to access this event app. Please remember to keep all your mobile devices on silent mode, and video recording is prohibited during the program. Thank you for your attention. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Our next panel discussion will soon begin. Please be seated. Fashion Summit has adopted a non-printing approach. The conference program, speaker profiles, and Q&A online platform are now all available on our event app. By scanning the QR code at the back of your admission badge, you will be able to access this event app. Please remember to keep all your mobile devices on silent mode, and video recording is prohibited during the program. Thank you for your attention. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Welcome back to Fashion Summit Hong Kong 2023. Let me introduce myself. I'm Isis, your MC for today's event. It's my great honor to be here meeting every one of you. So the next panel discussion will be focusing on the topic of the role of designers in today's circular fashion industry. Our Fashion Summit co-organizer, Redress, has conducted a research to explore the key challenge areas and opportunities for fashion designers who manufacture apparel in China and Southeast Asia in order to positively influence the circularity of their products. Today, Redress has invited representatives from the fashion industry to join us on this panel discussion and to discuss these issues together. As a friendly reminder, if you would like to ask questions during the Q&A section, please scan the QR code at the back of your admission badge to access our online platform to submit your questions. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, may I have the honor to invite our moderator. Sure, I'll give a round of applause to welcome fashion writer Miss Gemma A. Williams to proceed onto the stage. Please also join me in welcoming our speakers to join us on stage for the panel discussion. Please welcome Dr. Christina Dean, founder of Redress and founder of The R Collective. Mr. Andrew Dixon, Senior Vice President, Marketing Europe and Cobalt Fashion. Dr. Stéphane Ogé, Head of Quality and CSR Performance at Lacoste Operations. Shall I give a round of applause to welcome our moderator and also all our panelists. Over to you, Gemma.
Thank you so much. Welcome everyone here today. Today's panel is the role of designers in today's circular fashion industry. So I'd like to open up by maybe giving some context, and it's not very pretty, but bear with us. Fashion is one of today's most polluting industries. UBS has found that approximately 1 billion apparel items are sold per year, representing a 50% increase since 2006, with the majority of clothing going into landfill or being burned within 1 year of production. The fashion industry currently contributes up to 10% of global CO2. And according to the World Bank, on its current path, it's projected to use 25% of the world's carbon budget by 2050. The current fashion industry's linear system of take, make, dispose poses a significant environmental threat. The industry must transition to a circular fashion system, which takes into account the entire life cycle of a product, where resources are reused and nothing goes to waste. Now, currently, this transition is slow and, frankly, it's insignificant. Less than 1% of material used to produce clothing is recycled into new clothing. Much is needed to move to a circular fashion system, including transforming the fashion design stage. The EU Science Hub estimates that 80% of a product's environmental impact is determined at the design stage. Therefore, our industry needs to recognize and support the role, influence, and opportunity for fashion designers and design teams to become better informed and empowered decision makers at this critical stage. Now, maybe we could just have a quick show of hands from the room so we know who we're talking to. Hands up, the designers in the room. Great. Not as many as we thought. People from brands. Again, not as many as we were hoping. And then suppliers. Great. And any academics in the room? Okay, super. And so maybe just so we're clear, we thought it would be good to define sustainability and circularity, just so we're all on the one footing. So sustainability encompasses environmental, social, and economic considerations with an aim to meet present needs while ensuring the ability of future generations to meet theirs. And then circularity. This is a system of design which takes into account the entire life cycle of a product and where resources are reused and nothing goes to waste. So now, just a quick intro to our lovely speakers. I'm Gemma. I'm a fashion writer and curator, mostly looking at the China market. And we've got Dr. Christina Dean, founder of Redress and founder of the R Collective. Andrew Dixon, Senior Vice President Marketing Europe at Cobalt Fashion. And at the end, we have Stéphane Ogé, Head of Quality and CRS Performance at Lacoste Operations. Welcome to you all. So Christina, I'll start with you. You're the founder of Redress. You've been working in circular fashion and education since 2007. And to frame this panel here today, could you tell us about the research you've pioneered and the key findings?
Thank you so much, Gemma. Hello, everyone. So we at Redress have been really puzzled by a finding that you introduced in your introduction, which is that apparently 80% of the environmental impact of a product is laid down at the design stage. So it's not just the designer, it's the design stage. And this finding has really influenced our work to educate designers and people involved in the design stage to clear up the fashion industry. You know, what you presented was a pretty miserable introduction. So what we wanted to do at Redress was to understand what does this 80% impact at the design stage mean for designers and producers who are working within China and Southeast Asia. So we embarked on a research project with support by VF Foundation to investigate the role and influence of designers working in circular fashion at the design stage. And what we did basically was we did a quantitative survey and a qualitative set of interviews. So we did a survey which 195 people responded to who are working in the design stage, from design, product development, sourcing, and various other stakeholders, some consultants in the design stage. And we also did 40 very in-depth interviews with representatives from companies who are producing in China and Southeast Asia. And so the central real question was really about the role and influence and opportunity for circular designers. So we grouped the results, which I think we might show you on a, if we're lucky, we might have a PowerPoint if we're unlucky, you're going to have to listen to me, okay? You do have although the Fashion Summit is paperless, we've broken the rules, which is very typical of Redress, and we have printed the luxury of a piece of paper each, which have these results if we don't get our PowerPoint up. So the first finding is, and you might not be surprised, or you might be surprised, that there is a circular design knowledge gap. I wasn't surprised. I don't think any of you are surprised, right? There's a massive gap in education, we know that, but this particular circular design knowledge gap is a problem because of the problems that we have in the environment. 83% of the respondents from the design stage agree that implementing circular design is challenging. Oh, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Wait a sec. Let's just catch up. Thank you so much, all the tech team there. Marianne, I bet you were sweating there a little bit, weren't you? Here are the speakers. Yep. Okay. These are the definitions. So this is the first finding. And again, you might think, oh, well, I'm not surprised about that. But it's a big issue when 83% of the design stage and designers of our sample group find it very challenging. The second finding is that there is a financial barrier for circular design. Again, maybe you think, oh, well, I'm not surprised. All circularity and all sustainability and anything ethical and good and responsible seems to come with a bit of a price barrier. So that in some ways is also not too much of a surprise, with 71% of respondents saying that cost is the most significant resistance when choosing materials to reduce environmental impact. And the third finding is that there is a lack of commitment and collaboration from top management. And so for this, I wanted to read a quote, which was just one of the many significant statements that our respondents within the survey and stakeholder group said. When it comes to implementing sustainable and circular practices, it is crucial for the top management to drive the initiative. The progress towards sustainability is ongoing and requires a top-down approach where senior management sets policies and goals, followed by a cascading of objectives at lower levels. So it's a snapshot of some of the challenges. And of course, we know that there are also some opportunities that come with that for further discussion. So that was like just a very brief introduction to the survey. We will be on Monday, if you want to scan this, we're sending the full report with all of the results and recommendations, which I strongly suggest for you to scan, and you can register that to receive the report on Monday. So yeah, that was just a snapshot of what we were up to.
Great, thank you, Christina. And it's great that you take on that initiative to do this research. It's so important. And maybe we could hear from our other experts about their opinion of those findings. Andrew, in your very senior role at Cobalt, you're really in tune with fashion brands and what they're doing right now. Do you think it's very challenging for them, and what challenges do you find when you're supplying circular?
Yeah, it's extremely challenging, and I think I echo everything that you've just said. I mean, the biggest difficulty is getting the brand or the retailer to buy in. There's a lot of chat, there's a lot of intention, but actually getting brand leaders, brand owners, and even at retail, is getting the senior management to buy in and push and drip feed it down to the buyer, the product developer, the designer. And, I think that if there's a higher consumer demand, so the consumer was saying to those brands, where is that made? How is it made? What's the CO2 footprint on that particular garment? What's the traceability? I mean, there's elements of that happening already, but 1%, probably 2%. So there's significant challenges to get people to understand it and buy in.
Mm-hmm. So it's just the consumer, or are you finding any other
consumer and senior management? So I think it needs to be top down and bottom up for us to be able to make a significant difference.
Great. Okay, I'll come back to that. And Stéphane, maybe same question to you. I know you've got great cross-sector circular experience. What are you finding are the big challenges?
I think we could do a long list of challenges, of course.
Please do.
If I talk for Lacoste, one key challenge will be our legacy. When a customer is going to a Lacoste store, they want to have these polo shirts. They want to have a colorful polo shirt, 100% cotton, long-lasting. So they want this quality, and they want this quality because they've seen their father and their grandfather having the same polo shirts. So I think the question is, how do you make the same polo shirt, but with more circular and sustainable practices? So this is a big issue. We have been facing that in the past years, and we are still facing that. So what you can do, for example, is to change raw materials. You can use organic cotton, for example, to make it more sustainable. But is it enough? I'm not sure it's enough. So, for example, we are working on recycled cotton. But recycled cotton might affect the quality of the product. So the question is how much recycled cotton you can put in your product without affecting the durability of the product and the hand feel and all these aspects. So this is one big challenge, at least for our iconic products. Thankfully, we have some other products which are what we call seasonal, on which you can try new stuff. So on those one, we include in-depth the concept of circularity or sustainability. For example, we had a couple of years ago a loop polo in which we put 30% of recycled cotton, and it was very visible. It was a mix of the waste from our factories. We blend together, so you could see some dots, green dots, red dots, etc. So we try to have these small-scale projects, like piloting projects, in order then to reach our long-term commitments.
Great, really good to hear. And one thing, Christina, that you kind of brought up in your research was the cost. And let's face it, I think that's always an issue for everybody. Maybe, Andrew, I can come to you. And you mentioned like having this issue with getting your management and consumers on board. You know, how do you go about that? And
yeah, I think firstly, there's no lack of sustainable materials. There's been many for many years, and cost certainly has been driven down because demand has slightly increased, ways of manufacturing has improved and improved efficiencies. But there's a distinct lack of truly recycled materials and materials that we can have a really low impact. And we can all talk about, you know, organic cotton or RWS wool and things like that. But recycled materials, there's a distinct lack of materials. I think there's more about, there's a nervousness of the brand, the retailer, to try those materials. And I think, as you mentioned, you know, there's a concern about how does it perform? Is it, you know, is the pilling worse? What's the hand feel like? Is it going to wash worse? So there's a concern for that. I think that we're at a stage in our industry now where we can always reverse engineer into price. We've been battered so badly with everything's got to be price, price, price. And I think we're good enough now to be able to get to that. But it's been able to get the consumer to understand that recycled product is cool to buy. It's great to buy. It doesn't have to be virgin materials all the time.
mm-hmm. And it does feel like younger generations are more invested in that kind of
100%.
thing, yeah. Stéphane, I'm curious to know your thoughts on this. How do you argue cost challenges to your senior management?
So in our case, I would say thankfully, we worked a lot on the governance in our sustainability journey. So the top management is well aware of the targets that we set, and they sign it. So we have a minus 37% carbon footprint reduction target by 2030. We know that, they know that, and we know it will cost. And for the last years, Lacoste really puts millions euros on the table in order to go into that direction. The way we do it, we try to be the most pragmatic possible. We know that, okay, we need to reach that target. We have all these options to reach this target: raw materials, better manufacturing practices, better logistic supply chain practices. Okay, so you take all this list of actions, and then you try to see what is the most efficient in terms of sustainability and cost at the same time. So this is the kind of approach we are trying to use in order reach our targets and not to kill the company, because I think that's also a big target.
Yeah,
Can I
Christina,
quickly say something? I'm thinking about obviously the survey that we did and agonizing over all of the results that the designers and the design stage gave to us. So just to sort of spell it out, that the respondents representing the design stage came from designers, creative director, buyers, sales, merchandisers, and product developers. And why? As I'm listening to you to talk about cost, top down, killing the company, not killing the company, senior management, we're talking about governance, we're talking about sort of investment, like really complicated stuff. And yet you've got these creative people at the design stage that are trying to make this product more circular, more sustainable. They want to use better materials. They're trying their hardest to do the right thing. But a lot of the decisions are not their own decisions, because it goes to cost, it goes to company culture, it goes to how the profit margins of that company are being distributed and designed. So I just wanted to say that, because there's a lot of responsibility put on the designer and the design stage, which it should be, but there's a lot that's out of their control. And one quick thing, because we just came down from upstairs panel, and Andrew Lowe, who's the CEO of Crystal Group, yeah, he said, because everyone bangs on about money all the time, price, too expensive, got it. But he said so beautifully that he said something like, we shouldn't really consider something, it should not be thought of as expensive, it should be thought of as an investment. And just that flip in those words I thought was quite good, to think about cost. It might be X% a little bit more for a more sustainable raw material, but it is ultimately an investment in a more resilient business, product and future. Not just future for the planet, it's actually better for the company to have a more durable product, particularly with, you know, the changes that come with legislation, etc.
Absolutely, yeah, great points, Christina. Andrew?
Yeah, just on top of that, I think he also mentioned about finding partners that are on the same journey. And I think that's just as important. I mean, we, you know, as a business, we have customers that have very little interest, and we have customers that are all about sustainability and how to reduce their carbon footprint. So, of course, we can't always choose who we deal with, depending on, I mean, someone as big as Crystal or Tal, Xiqu, for sure they can pick and choose. Other businesses don't have that choice. I mean, I think it's great that Lacoste and Gant have the mindset to be able to make choices, and because you've got such a strong brand, you can make those influences. Other companies can't necessarily do that, but finding the right partners is good. I mean, just something we do at Cobalt is like 65% of the 40-odd million sweaters we knit are coming from a sustainable element of materials, at least 30-40%. We try and get the designers, regardless of who they work for, but in ourselves, is to come to our yarn shows. So we do a yarn show each time at the same time as Spin Expo. So we always demonstrate lots of different yarns. So there's trying to get all those different attributes in front of the designer.
Great. And I mean, legislation is obviously a big barrier, I would say. Christina, you're looking at me. Are you eager to talk about that?
I'm really no brain when it comes to legislation, but obviously I keep up with it. I'm not a lawyer, and a lot of it is way above my paycheck. But the big news that's on everybody's lips and has been for a number of years is the EU legislation, which is coming into force over the next few years. The scope of it is yet TBC, but really what will happen in the next 5 years is great changes on the way that companies are producing if they are in the EU, and more importantly for you and us here in Asia, the EU will be restricting the types of products and regulating on the types of products that will come into the EU. Now, the EU is the world's single biggest importer of textiles globally and apparel. And of all the textiles and apparel that are imported into the EU, 70% of that comes from APAC. So what does that mean for us all? It means that as they get tighter and tighter on the EU, anyone, and you will speak much better than me because you've got European customers, that companies out here, whether it's textile, garment, if you're a designer, whatever you're doing, you're going to have to comply with EU regulations. And I'm really, really excited about that because it's obviously a big step. It is also a business risk because if you don't get it right, you can't import into the EU. You've lost your European customers. And so this is a massive stick. You know, if you want to get a donkey to move, you put a carrot in front of its mouth, it might walk, or you beat the crap out of it, excuse my language, you get a stick. Sorry, it's very technical language. You get a stick and you beat it. And that is what this EU legislation is going to do. And so if we think about top management, leadership, and all of this and that, well, those people that are importing in, or exporting into the European Union need to get it together because they have to invest into a better company and sourcing and circular design. And I read actually from a financial analyst report, this was a report that was written for investors who are heavily invested into textile companies and garment companies in Asia. And I'm going to read it out exactly. This was a September financial analyst report. They said, because of the EU legislation, quoted, an urgent reallocation of resources and training may be warranted to deliver the supply chain of the future. The workforce in Asia needs to be reskilled. We need to invest in R&D, specifically to circularity, which would help to maintain competitiveness. So what I'm saying is that all this circularity and sustainable design and ethical design, all this, that, and the other, it's not about really being kind to the environment. It's actually also being ready for the future of the fashion industry, which is basically upon us.
Yeah, great point. And actually, Andrew, so we were talking about this coming in, and Christina's saying we've got to get ready, but you were saying to me that not many people know what this legislation is, or they can decipher what it is. So
yeah, I think
big issue, right?
In fairness to the manufacturers in APAC, I think they're probably more ready than the brands are. They're more ready than the retailers are because, as you said, it's their business. It's live or die. What I don't think the people that we're selling to, the people we're manufacturing for, with some exceptions, of course, really understand what's around the corner and what they need to do, how prepared they can be. So, you know, we see that at senior management level, that we have high-level meetings, and we see that at buyer level. Again, the intention is there. I'm not saying it's all negative because everybody wants to do it. But then there's not a clear, as yet, a very, very clear directive from the EU about how this is going to happen, how it's going to pan out. In fact, the conversations I've had with a gentleman from the EU Commission based here in Hong Kong is very much about getting information for the consumer to decide. It's not like we're going to tax you more because you're shipping something that's not recycled. It's here's the life cycle analysis on that product and that product. Here's the QR code. And then you, the consumer, decide what you're going to buy. Not about taxation at the moment. So for me, that's not far-reaching enough. It's not, you know, we're not hitting the donkey hard enough, or the carrot's not big enough. You know, it needs to be a bit more. And I think if it does come, what will happen is that those brands and retailers will then just pass the taxation or on to the supplier. So then we need to be ready for that. We need to, and I think we mostly are. As I said, there's lots of sustainable materials out there. We just need to be able to measure it properly. So whether it's a life cycle analysis or whether it's carbon footprint, to be able to say to our customer, oh, that A gives that option, B is that option. It's like I mentioned earlier, good, better, best. For years we've had good, better, best pricing. Next thing we need to do is good, better, best environmental impact. And I think the buyers eventually will get to that. They'll be asking us, well, how much does that cost, but what's the CO2 footprint on that item? I think we're almost there, actually. Probably another year or two, we should have that CO2 on particular items.
That would be great. And Stéphane, maybe if you've got anything to add on this topic, EU legislation, and maybe how it's different in Asia as well. Kind of, what are the fallouts there?
So, well, Lacoste is a French brand, so of course we need to be very aligned with the EU regulation and the French regulation, which is sometimes more stringent than the EU one. But we are watching the other regulations. So for example, I know that China is setting a goal for 2030 to recycle 30% of the textile waste. This is huge. This is amazing. So what we can see is when China will move, they will move super fast. So I think for all the manufacturers and the brands, we need to be ready on that. And,
can I ask a question on that? I'm not the moderator, but I'm terribly nosy. If that is the case, then that we get this direction from the China government around 30% recycled yarn, or recycling 30% of textile waste?
Of their textile waste.
But then does that make the design stage, like if we've got designers in here, is that going to make circular design much more possible for Chinese designers at the design stage, do you think?
So I think it will definitely, and I think the China government have that in mind because it will go hand by hand with circular design guidelines and strategies to communicate and to train the people. Because if I'm the Chinese government and I receive only mixed materials, very hard to recycle, I will never be able to reach my target. So of course you need to do all this this work, and this is very very important. But yeah, as said, so Lacoste is a European-based company. So one very important regulation is the PEF, Product Environmental Footprint, which is upcoming, which is a life cycle assessment of a product, and you will have a score from A to E, depending on the performance of your product. So even if I agree it's not carbon taxes, that might come in a couple of years, but still for us it's very important because when you buy a polo shirt and you're a customer, you buy it €100 or more sometimes, you cannot accept to have a score of D or E on the hang tag. So us at least, we really take it seriously, and we need to work on that. If it's not for sustainability perspective, it's at least for brand image.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good start. I mean, we've got to start somewhere because there's been nothing since until now. So that sort of environmental passport per garment. I mean, we do it on fridges and hairdryers and electrical goods. How much power this fridge uses or this TV uses, A, B, C, D, E, or whatever. So we should be able to do the same on clothing.
Yeah, great point. Christina, I'm going to come back to you, and kind of what we've discovered here is that this is quite a dark situation, basically. And your point about, a lot of the control is out of designers' hands, which is quite worrying, actually. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about Redress and the educational aspect that you've been dealing with over the couple of years? And how are you empowering designers?
Absolutely. I think, closing the gap on education around circularity is obviously very important for the environment, but it's also important for the economy to fuel businesses and their growth. So we've been doing education online, in-person workshops, academies in Hong Kong, further afield, targeting emerging fashion designers who are generally, students plus 4 years max experience, typically through the Redress Design Award. So it's an introduction level of circular, sustainable fashion design, marketing, etc. And so just looking at to give you a snapshot of the appetite and the need for this education, we at Redress, we've got 180 university partners around the world who we collaborate with on educational material. And just this year, we've got 68,000 hits to our Redress Academy, which is our open source multi-language education.
What does that mean, hits?
It's
website
hits.
visits or
Site visits, yeah. So, and that's just this year. So why I say that is because there's a need, there's an urgency, there is a gap, and as a non-profit, what's the point of a non-profit? We fill a gap where other stakeholders haven't yet entered that gap. And so for us in this room, it's education. We obviously work with consumers as well. And I think for me, when I hear that, financial, sort of very complex financial analyst reviews are saying that there is an urgent need to upskill and reskill the supply chain, it makes me feel excited that the gap will be closed, that we won't be a lonely little non-profit in Hong Kong trying to educate the region's designers, and that we're getting a bigger push for investment. I also read yesterday, it really surprised me, that the average R&D spend of a fashion brand is less than 1% of revenue. Now, I was really surprised because I don't know who found that out. I know where I read it. But also, I'm just surprised that it was quite low and that within that less than 1% of revenue going to R&D, I think they need to increase that. I mean, I don't know what you're nodding. You could get, yeah? Do you know what Lacoste spends on R&D?
No, I have no idea. But well, we have a R&D department in our factory in France that are working on these issues. But it could be always more. But thankfully, we have good suppliers, and we can put the pressure on them so they can develop.
Can I be one of your suppliers?
Andrew and Stéphane, do you think emerging designers are they're the future of tackling this problem? Are they equipped to face it?
Well, I've been at Lacoste for 4 years now, and I really feel the difference. We do something that we call eco-design events every season to launch the season, to give the strategy, what are the ambition in terms of sustainable raw materials, etc. And we also do some training. So, for example, we'll take one polo shirt or one jacket, and we'll ask them, okay, how could you make it more sustainable? So we do that kind of exercises, and you can really see the young generation. The new designers are coming with very good ideas, very good energy. So we need to keep that momentum. I'm not saying it's always the case. So I think universities and needs to keep going on training on that. But I think, yes, we are on the good way.
Great.
Yeah,
Andrew?
I mean, I think, look, everything starts with great design. And without great design, there's not much else. And that's why we see sometimes the high street looking a bit the same, because the designers are not being given the empowerment, they're not being given the chance to really, truly develop. So, in answer to your question, unfortunately not. They're not ready. They're not because it's not their fault. They're just not being given the chance. And I think we need to educate the educators so that there's more, I think there needs to be more industrial placement. I mean, if I think back, when I first started the industry, there was always industrial placements, there was always internships. So that really made a difference for designers because they got real hand experience, whether that's post or pre-graduate. I think that there's a chance for, you know, the designers are the consumers, the next generation of consumers, and they really get what their peer groups are buying and want to buy, not the so-called industry leaders, because they have a clue. They haven't got a clue. So I think there's, you know, we need to be able to have that confidence to give the designers a chance to really show a difference. And I think then the consumer and the senior management can start to understand it and buy in. I think that's a key thing. We've got to give design. It doesn't matter whether you're designing polo shirts or knitwear. I mean, all apparel needs to be empowered by design. And it always used to be. Always used to be. Design was everything. You know, a designer, when I was in a buying role a few years ago, then the designer was on par with the buyer. I mean, it was all collaborative, and everything came through design. That's been taken away. That needs to come back.
And if I may add something, very good point. We are missing maybe one stakeholder, which is the customer that you mentioned, Andrew. When we look at who is the first retailer last year in France, it's Shein. So we can question the fact that the new generation are looking for more sustainable garments, because it's what you hear. When you ask people, they would say, okay, yes, I'm going to go for a more sustainable product, but actually, when they buy it, they don't make necessarily these efforts. So this is one key stakeholder we need to keep in mind as well.
Actually, I've got a great question here that I would love to answer, so I'm kind of opening up to questions now. But to Andrew's point, how can we move the needle forward in terms of making consumers buy more sustainably? I thought you'd be really excited to answer that question.
Education. But
do consumers really want to be educated?
Not really, no. I mean, they just think about price mostly. So I suppose it's just to move the needle. It's really hard. It's really hard. It needs a generation change, and maybe when the consumers in their teens and their 20s, the next generation, will see that when they're in their 30s and 40s. Maybe they will be a bit more thinking about what they're purchasing. So, look, I'm not for government control at all, but certain legislation needs to come in place, because then people will have to do something about it.
I would agree. I mean, if you're saying we've got to wait 20 years, that's pretty worrying.
Too late.
Yeah. Okay, please send in more questions. Does the vintage trend help make fashion more sustainable?
Well, actually, yes. And I was going to jump off what you were saying, Andrew, to add that. So I'll take that one, which is sort of blurring the two questions in one. I think I've become slightly pessimistic about listening to any consumer research for the same point you said, Stéphane, which is they say but they don't do. So you pick any survey from anywhere around the world, they're all terribly sustainable, they'll all spend 10% more, but none of them do. But at least there's a nice intention there. And when I say they, I don't wish to be rude, because they is also me. So unfortunately, consumer research surveys aren't really very accurate. And there's part of me that thinks that many consumers are moving away from fast and cheap because they know it's poor quality and it falls apart. And I think, but then when we know that the biggest retailer last year in France was Shein, and I know that in the US it was the most downloaded app a few months ago, and you know, there's lots of consumers, they all behave differently, they all have different price points and desires and longings for their life, so you can't obviously bracket them all together. So it's a mess. But to come to the positive side and to answer this question about vintage, and by vintage I'm just going to talk about secondhand, so I'm not going to classify how old or how vintage something is. I think what's very, very exciting about the circular economy is that the technology boom in terms of resale, rental, and these apps where you can easily resell your clothes has completely opened up the secondhand clothing market, and it's made it accessible, cheap and easy. So I think that's a great way that bridges the customers who are buying fast fashion, who love consuming, who want pink today and they want purple tomorrow, whatever, that they can do that through secondhand. So I think that's a little bit of optimism to share. And we know that from Redress. We've got a permanent charity shop here in Hong Kong. We do lots of pop-ups. And we've been doing that for like 10 years. And 10 years ago, we had a certain type of customer. And today, we have every type of customer. And so that old sort of feeling, and I think it's an old feeling, and I know some people still feel it, about secondhand being dirty and, you know, sort of suspicious, or, you know, having sort of negative connotations. We're definitely not seeing that with the broader local community who shop secondhand.
Great. Andrew, would you maybe want to?
Yeah, I mean, totally. But also, I think, you think it's a generational thing, isn't it? You post-war, everybody had secondhand clothes. Everyone was hand-me-downs, and that was the norm. And then people started to have more money, the middle class, wanted to buy new things, then the onset of fast fashion. Let's just hope things are going, circling back round to having having less, but letting it wear for longer. You know, we're a great advocate of natural materials. I mean, how often do you wash a wool jumper? You keep it for years because it's your favorite piece, as opposed to an acrylic piece that you have maybe for a few months and you wash it every week because it stinks. So, you know, so this hopefully that we're perhaps getting to a period where second-hand clothes are no longer seen as dirty; it's seen as aspirational. You know, certainly in the kids of the teenage and 20s, we talked earlier before, you know, about student and our own experiences. That's what they want to buy. They don't want to go to Zara and H&M and the Primarks as much, but not everybody.
But at the design stage, there is a ramification for designers in the room of the opening up of the second-hand clothing market. It means that the product in the first life needs to be more durable because it needs to survive more lives. And also, there is a much more transparent way of looking at the value of secondhands, because you can crawl through any of the data and look at what is the resale value of my Stella McCartney, my Gucci, my blah, 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 blah. So from the original design stage, there's much more emphasis actually on durability if it's to maintain that price. Yeah, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, Maureen Sayer, who does great work in Paris, was saying that she's constantly using old materials and remaking, but the longevity is becoming a huge issue because the newer clothes get, the less they survive. Yeah. Okay.
Just to add, I'm very aligned with the point of Christina and the opportunity with secondhand, and I think it's very clear when you look at the brands. There is no brand who's not thinking on how you can internalize the second-hand market of my own brand. Lacoste is thinking about it. We have Aigle, which is part of the Lacoste group as well. They also developed their own second-hand platform, and there are many PVH, whoever. So this is a big opportunity that any brand is now thinking.
But do you think, let's just say, I won't say Lacoste, let's just say another company, they develop a second-hand market and then they discover that all of their products are falling to pieces on the second-hand market. Do you think that that's going to drive them to improve the durability from the get-go?
No, that's a very good point. Indeed, in Lacoste's case, we don't have this issue usually, but it's true that I'm not sure you will find a lot of Shein products on Vinted or that kind of platforms because it doesn't worth it for the final customer.
Well, we have a question here from Paul. It's about using tech, which we didn't really touch on. Is there any great tech there that can kind of maximize people's interest in sustainability or engagement?
Well, I can say something briefly about the survey results, and then I'll leave it to you because I'm not an expert on this, but just digitizing the design stage and to free up the designers to learn and to have more capacity to understand other sustainability circular design techniques that they can do, i.e. design tools to make the process much more efficient, gives them the mental capacity to pursue other improvements to the design stage. And obviously we know digitized design tools and 3D design tools are helping to improve efficiency. So just from our research, that's what we found.
Yeah, I think tech is absolutely needed because when we want to do life cycle assessment of all our products, we need data. And if we need data, we need to collect the data to our customers and the suppliers, and the suppliers of our suppliers. So we need some good tools who are able to collect the data, to make simulation, to have the accurate footprint of our product. So yeah, it's absolutely everywhere. We talk about traceability. We talk about proving that the cotton you're using comes from this place, not from this place. So it's everywhere. And I think don't forget the old school tech, like the manufacturing practices, which are evolving a lot as well. So yeah, there is a lot of innovation required.
Yeah, I'm just echo all of that. Really, virtual sampling, 3D fitting. There's a lot of technology that's been out there for a long time. It is evolving. Better ways of manufacturing. I mean, you can't. Making a shirt, making a T-shirt, making a sweater is still quite analog. You can't really do anything quicker from that. But in terms of how you do the prototyping, and I know from a design point of view, designer's point of view, they are getting the education of how to design virtually, as well as having that skill and that flair to be able to create. Talking of, I'm going to give a little plug to one of our businesses called KnitUp, which can create a single piece, and you can create it by yourself for the single consumer. I mean, and it's zero waste because you're creating it for yourself. And have a look at that. I would say have a look at KnitUp online. It's a really interesting creative tool. And it's not even if it's at its infancy. We're already onto the second version, and it's a clever tool as well. So it's something that I think as individual creators, if we've got a lot of creators in the room, or people that want to be creators, have a look at that, because it really does show a very, very low waste model.
Great. We're just out of time now. So thank you to the Fashion Summit for giving us this platform to discuss this great topic. Thank you to my panelists, Dr. Christina Dean, Andrew Dixon, and Stéphane Ogé. And thanks for having us all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, moderator, and all our panelists. Please remain seated and let's take a picture together. A big smile to the camera. Center, please. Thank you so much for bringing us such meaningful perspectives. Thank you. A big smile. Once again, a big round of applause to thank you all our panelists as well as our moderator. Please be seated. Thank you.